Wow, that's fantastic, Phil. You've got real stratigraphy there.
I know, it's a cracking section. It's a very, very complicated story. You see, I think right at the beginning is this one that's coming over like that and going right the way down there. And you can see what they've done, they've really, really carefully built it because they've capped it off with these lovely flat slabs of stone. And I do wonder whether or not that phase may have had a palisade at the front, because look at the way these two stones tip in like that. Just wonder whether there may not have been some sort of timber palisade there. But then you see after that, what they've done, they've actually enhanced the bank, made it bigger by putting in that rubble there. And then finally, they've capped it off with all this material that sits on the top.
So you've got at least 3 phases, possibly 4.
It's a very, very complicated story.
Yeah.
But the best, if you like, is yet to come, because here's the back of the rampart. Look at these stones tipping down like that. That's the back of the rampart, and it's separated by this. It's a solid stone wall. Look, we've got these vertical pitch stones there and vertical pitch stones there, and the whole gap in between is filled in with these horizontal packing stones.
I mean, for all the world, that looks more like building than rampart, doesn't it?
It is crucially important what the site must contain.
This is great stuff. Evidence of phases indicates that whoever built this bank came back to reinforce it again and again over some considerable time. More importantly, it looks like there may have been a wooden palisade at this end of the site too. But whether these are 2 sections of one continuous earthwork that encircled the top of this hill, we don't yet know. Back in Trench 4, there's no sign of John's roundhouse. In fact, there's no sign of anything much at all.
And it does make me question, if we don't start to begin to find stuff in here, whether we had any occupation up here at all.
Evidence of settlement up here is proving elusive. But it being late July, there's a far bigger problem brewing: the weather. And unfortunately, it's turning out to be a typical British summer. Lovely. It's day 3 in our search for an early mill in Dotton in Devon. At the end of yesterday, Phil found an intriguing piece of wood.
Oh, wow.
That is interesting, isn't it?
Didn't expect that.
But what is this?
This is a piece of the water wheel. It's the rim.
How do you know that?
Well, look, you've got a really nice curve there, and we've got a lump of wood here, which I think is part of the base of a paddle.
And what are these lumpy bits?
Well, we've got bits of pins for holding the paddles in place.
But do you know that the water wheel would have looked like that?
I do, because we've got this really nice late 19th century photograph.
That's cheating.
Which shows us the rim of the water wheel.
So this actually is part of that?
That wheel is a fragment there.
Late 19th century?
Late 19th century, judging by the guy with the flat cap.
Late 19th century doesn't sound much, really, but actually it's 150 years ago, virtually, isn't it? In his trench, Phil started digging. But there's a problem. There's more wood, but there also seems to be concrete.
Oh, what the hell? This is confusing, Mike. Because there's actually a piece of timber. This timber is coming right in underneath there.
Underneath the concrete?
Underneath the concrete. And yet, it's occupying this trough in the concrete, and it looks for all the world as though I've got concrete. I'm not sure whether I haven't got concrete right the way down there.
Could it like be stone at the bottom, Phil, rather than concrete? An earlier lining of the wheel pit?
Well, it might be.
Because if you've got wood underneath the concrete, that might mean we've got an earlier structure to the wheel pit.
Yeah, but then you see, if this concrete is laid directly on it, it might actually be stuck onto it. Well, I reckon that concrete's going to have to come up, one way or the other.
At the other end of the mill building, we've already gone through the floor of the domestic area, but there's nothing datable and no other features. This trench did give us some internal walls. We begin to plot them out, to see if we can understand how this building worked on the inside. While the hunt for the Tudor building continues, we're also looking for evidence of a monastic settlement around the church. We still want to find it. Stuart thinks he has an idea of where it could have been.
See down below us where the trench is?
Yeah.
That's cut across a line of a ditch which goes straight up there and leads straight towards the churchyard.
So it's going beyond the churchyard wall down there?
Well, I would suspect so. You can't see any trace of it in the
No,
churchyard.
no.
But it actually comes along from there, down below us,
Yeah.
heads towards that pylon there in the
Yeah.
distance. But it does a right angle across the field there.
You see where that greener grass is across there?
It's just a bit beyond that. There's actually quite a dip when you get down there.
Right.
And then on the aerial photograph and in the earthworks, you can actually see a ditch heading down towards the river. You see where the low ground is, down there?
Yeah.
Well, that's where there's a series of fish ponds now, probably to do with the manor house.
See the bottom of the slope in front of us?
It
in
is,
fact,
but
yeah.
what that dip is and why they've used it as fish ponds is because it's an old river channel coming through there.
Ah, right.
So that
Yeah.
might be the sort of former edge of the river in the Saxon period. So I think what this monastic enclosure is doing is it's coming along here, doing a right angle, heading
back
down to the river.
Yeah.
Potentially where it is over that side, obviously the church is there, which you'd expect
You'd
to be
expect that to be in it, wouldn't you?
inside
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And to me, it looks as if the other edge of it is going to be where the village is separated from.
So
from
where
here.
the big hedges and the big trees is where it's getting back towards the river again.
That's right. I mean, it's almost like the field that we're in.
Yeah.
Apart from a small bit at that far
Yeah.
end, is the
Yeah.
monastic enclosure. It gives you that that sense of isolation that I know you like with monasteries.
Well, that's right. Yeah, it's almost on a promontory sticking eastwards, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, that's absolutely ideal.
This is the area described by Stuart. It's the edge of the monastic enclosure, with the church inside it and the edge of the village forming one side to it. It's a huge site, but entirely what one might expect. Mick's happy with it. Back on the ground, Phil has removed the legs, they were from a dog, and he's got some more good news for Mick. Phil, that is not a 1x1 test pit.
No, it's a 2x2 test pit, actually.
It started out as a 1x1. though,
Exactly.
didn't
So
it?
why did you extend it?
Because of what we found in here. I mean, look, we've got this feature, what looks like possibly a shallow pit. And it's not merely the fact that we got a pit down there, it's what we got out of it.
Is that Saxon?
Yeah, it's this 450 to 850 Middle Saxon stuff.
So does that mean that this feature, whatever it is Saxon?
It could be. You've got to be a little bit careful because we've also had early medieval pottery from there as well. But the thing that we have not had is late pottery or any post-medieval pottery. So, in other words, I'm fairly convinced that that feature has got to be early medieval at the latest.
Mick, have we any idea what that is?
Well, I don't think we have at this stage, and this is one reason for extending the trench, isn't
Exactly,
it? But
exactly.
it is the sort of thing you expect on these sort of Saxon sites, where they've put timbers in the floor or posts or something like that. And look how close to the church we are.
Yeah.
We're right in the area you would expect activity at that time.
So what are you going to do with this now?
We'll just take it on down, try and find out what this feature is to enlarge the trench.
We've got a lot to do today, haven't we?
We have, yeah, but this is coming on. We might even have a go at this one later on as well. It's got the same sort of thing in the bottom of it.
The hunt for the Tudor house is going well. Kerry is cleaning up the main part of the wall. Some locals are helping expose more of it, while we're beginning to think that the material in this trench is to the front of the house.
Back to there. Then if we have... I think we'll be able to get that far. Okay. Ready?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Right, now we'll slide forward.
Mick's keen to find out exactly how 16th century sailors would have loaded and fired these huge metal cannon on board a moving ship. He's enlisted the help of armoury expert Nick Hall.
Here, Nick? This is a replica, presumably.
It is a replica, and obviously you can't fire original guns
No,
for this
well,
period.
you shouldn't, should you, really? In case
Well, I
you,
think-
you damage them. Can you take me through how they would have worked this from the beginning to the end?
Yeah,
'Cause
let's go over and get the bits that we
Okay,
need
I'll
to
give you a
do
hand.
The key to firing any gun is to create a charge large enough to propel your shot. but you need an awful lot of gunpowder and wadding to fire a heavy 16th century cannonball.
That is actually the powder chamber. As far as we know, the powder would be poured in loose, and then there'd be a wad on top. Now, on land, hay was a commonly available material, or dry grass that you could just find, because most campaigns, as you know, were fought in the summer anyway. But on a ship, oakum is the most common sort of scrap material.
This is bits of string, is it?
And you'd put some of that in, ram it down on top of the powder. Right. Now, what have we missed out?
Well, apart from putting the gunpowder in, you mean?
Well, we assume we've got gunpowder, we've got the top wad. We want to hit the enemy, don't we?
So
we need a projectile.
Ah, right.
Now I've popped one down here. This is actually one found locally. It's it wouldn't actually probably be fired from this gun, but
is this roughly the right size for this gun? Is it?
Yes, but it would be loaded at this end.
It is actually slightly too big.
It's a fraction big, but it was one that was from the site, so we thought we'd just
show how that would be. They would put it in here.
In there.
Okay, so we've got our ball in.
So we assume we've loaded a ball. We've got a chamber.
We've got a chamber in there.
Let me pass that one to you. If you hold it, it's like a beer tankard, isn't it? Made of metal.
Yeah, and it's got the little hole in the top.
Yeah.
That then drops in there, does it? That's okay.
That's fine.
So that goes up into the back of there.
You pop that in there, and then you see this big wedge here. If you
right, this thing here.
That
obviously goes in the back, doesn't it?
Goes in there.
Do we actually have to knock that in?
I've brought
so up we go.
Once the charge is firmly in place, all we need to send the ball on its way is a little more gunpowder and a 16th century match.
On the order from the gun
this would be lit.
Yes, sorry, that would be lit. You would touch it off.
Bang, off it goes.
With 2 trenches underway, geophys turn their attention to the ancient parkland alongside the ploughed field. The park hasn't been farmed for centuries and could reveal completely undisturbed archaeology. I took the opportunity to catch up with Alan Luton, the detectorist who found all the Roman metal finds. So 8 years ago, you were walking along this field with your metal detector, and then what happened?
Well, I just suddenly started finding Roman coins. I mean, normally you may expect to find the odd Roman coin, like casual loss, because supposedly there's a Roman road going along the bottom of the field, or so they say. But I started to find the odd silver coin, and then a couple of bronze coins, and then they started to form a pattern, a few brooches, and I just had the feeling that this had been some sort of a settlement site. Maybe it's a Roman camp or something like that, a marching camp.
Had you ever found anything like this before?
No, no.
And have you ever found anything like this since?
No, not at all.
Alan's lent us all his finds for expert analysis.
Well, we can see at a glance, I mean, we've got mainly Roman coins there and some Roman objects like that Roman brooch, but we've got some medieval objects here like this lead pilgrim souvenir.
What excites me at first glance is we've got lots of these large coins, which are fairly early Roman coins. Unfortunately, they're not in very good condition.
There's quite a spread of dates there right from the outset.
Well, that's what we really want to know, is the spread of dates, not just sort of Roman and medieval, but also within the Roman period, because it's a long time, the Roman period. You tend to dismissively think Romans, just Romans, but it's 350 years, and we really need to know when we've got the concentrations of finds. Are they early Roman or 100 years after the Roman conquest or what?
The lack of finds in the trenches is becoming a worry, and Alan's coins are adding to the mystery.
Right, how are we getting on with looking at these coins? Because we really need to start to try and get an idea of what sort of date stuff's coming in at.
Right, we've got a pattern building up. We've got Roman material, in fact, one coin from the 1st century BC.
Oh, really?
1st century AD, this large group from the 2nd century, we've got the 3rd century, and we've also got the 4th century. But then we've got a gap.
And then after the gap, we start getting coins again from the 1200s. We've got coins throughout the Middle Ages, we've got Tudor coins, we've got Stuart coins, we've got coins from the 18th century, we've got coins from the present century.
Guy, what do you think's going on in the Roman bit? What's distinctive about this? Is it the typical sort of collection you'd expect?
It's exactly not a typical collection. What we've got here is quite a lot of silver coins. This is the equivalent of the £20 note. You don't go around chucking £20 notes away. What we've got very little of is the very small, low-value coinage, which ought to dominate these 3rd and 4th century
that's
groups.
normally, your Roman site is riddled with these little late things that are half a piece.
For each one of these, we ought to have a couple of hundred of these. and that there's a real mystery. So this looks like a neat pattern, but in fact there's another story weaved into this.
So Alan, did you have any thoughts about what's going on in the Roman period in your site?
Well, yes, initially I was under the assumption that this was probably a marching camp, you know, perhaps when the road was under construction at some point, or when there were troop movements were needed further north up towards Hadrian's Wall, something like that.
Would that fit with you guys?
I've got a rather more radical suggestion. It looks like a lot of coins, and Craig and I have been talking about this. All these, we think, probably come from a single collection.
A hoard?
A hoard. It's a one-site thing, and these may be the same.
Alan, does that fit with how you found them? Were all these silver coins from sort of within 6 feet of each other?
No, they weren't, no. They were scattered over an area about 80 metres, so quite a large area of the site.
That's not necessarily incompatible with a hoard, because if the hoard pot that it would have been buried in was broken up through ploughing, you would expect them distributed over an area. But we shouldn't have this number of silver coins.
If that was a hoard, would that then feel very much more typical?
No, because even that is unusual. This lot might be a bronze hoard, and we've got some very late silver coins here. These are extremely rare, and these, I understand, Alan, were found very close to one another.
Yes, they were,
right.
in another part of the site. Yeah.
So, in other words, we're looking at 3 possible coin hoards on this site.
So, we've really got 2 very different theories at the moment. Either it might have been a military marching camp, and we might find some military stuff. On the other hand, it might be a site that people come back to at major intervals to bury hoards. So
we've got a real mystery going on here.
So why have we got this great hoard of silver coins?
I don't know, it doesn't make any sense, because they're high status objects and we're looking at very, very ordinary low status settlement here.
Yeah, but look at the geophysics now, Mick. We've expanded the survey area. We've got this big roadway going through there.
Right.
I think we're well back from the action here.
Yeah, I mean, this is beginning to look more like some sort of village settlement, isn't it? I mean, these look like the crofts of the individual farms, in which case we are right at the back of the back ditch of one of them.
But would this be high enough status to justify the find of all these coins?
I don't think so. I think we're still looking at a sort of Roman rural settlement, basically. OK, they might be doing a bit of industrial activity, but it's still not, you know, not high status at all.
It's intriguing, isn't it? We've got this real mismatch. On the one hand, we've got the high status coins. On the other hand, we've got what appears to be a pretty low status site. This mismatch has a huge implication for Alan, the detectorist who made all these finds. Confirmed as definite hoards, he's now going to have to declare everything to the coroner as possible treasure trove and risk losing half his finds. So is there a different law covering something that's a hoard as compared with something that isn't a hoard?
Well, if it's a hoard, then it'll go to inquest, and then it'll be decided what they are or what the value is, and then if any interested parties, say a museum or whatever, are interested in purchasing certain rare pieces, if there are rare pieces there, then they will have an option to buy, which is great.
Yeah.
Other than that, then it's returned, and then I can decide with the landowner whether we're going to share them out or, I suppose, sell them and split the market value. I've got to obey the letter of the law, there's no doubt about that. But I have 14 days in which to do so. So if I wanted to put a case about my sort of idea that I don't really think it's a hoard, I could if I wanted to. I've obviously got to contact the landowner about this. I'll probably have a few days to reflect, look at them and say, OK, it'd be nice to know you, 10 years' work, bye-bye. I don't know.
So you came here of your own free will,
Yep.
showed us your coins,
Yep.
and you may go away with only half of them.
Well, yes, I consider myself a fairly mature person. I'll just have to live with it, won't I?
Welcome back to Bedford Purley Woods in Cambridgeshire, where thanks to laser technology we've been able to see through the trees to reveal evidence of a large complex of Roman buildings. And so far we've opened up 2 trenches to try and find out what type of settlement this was. It's early days yet, but in Phil's trench we've got lots of Roman walls to puzzle over. While in our second trench, Matt's got his own Roman structure to make sense of. I, meanwhile, am off to find out more about the person who first discovered this site. Helen, who was the antiquarian who came across this site a couple of 100 years ago?
He was a chap called Edmund Artis. We've got a photo of him, amazingly. And he was a kind of gentleman archaeologist, antiquarian. He was actually interested in most things. He also was an expert on fossils and geology. And in 1828, he made this completely fantastic map of the area. And the bit we're interested in, our wood, is up here. Now, you can see we've got this lovely red horseshoe-shaped Roman building, and he's also put these brown dots on, which he codes as ironworks. And I think these must be pits dug to remove iron ore.
Did he actually do any digging?
Well, I have been trying to find that out, and I can find no concrete evidence that he actually dug a hole. It may have been he just came past and saw earthworks or even standing buildings.
Stuart, how does his map relate to what we can see on the ground?
Well, I like it, I do, because when I came up here this morning and sort of walked through, I drew in my sketchbook a shape that looks exactly like that. This thing would have been visible when he drew it, it's still visible now.
Isn't it a bit bizarre, though, that he's drawn this horseshoe building, bits of which seem to go under the road?
Well, I mean, it's possible that when he came here that he could still see remains of bumps going under the surfaces of the road, as it were. But whether they carried on into this field, we'll never know, because if you look over there, it's been quarried out and now it's being used as landfill, so we'll never know whether these ranges actually extended into that area.
Unfortunately, Edmund Artis never published his written reports, so I guess we'll be finishing the job for him over the next 3 days. But at least we've got our high-tech picture of the lumps and bumps to guide us, and Stuart's insisting that the only way to look at it properly is in black and white and in 3D.
This big regular horseshoe building range, you say, this is what Artis drew on his plan quite clearly. This is where Phil is digging in this building cluster in here. There's clearly other buildings and structures coming up along here, and at the north end, this is where Matt's trench has gone along there. I mean, you can see there's a regular courtyard, as it were, the range coming along the south here. This has never been spotted before. There's clearly an area there which is another possible isolated building. If you come away from the site, there's a rectangular area showing up there which looks like either a building or a big compound. Very definitely a building sitting there.
Well, we can't just sit around speculating and watching a square spinning round. Thanks to these high-tech results and Stuart, we're now looking at a site that's much bigger than we originally thought. So we need to choose our targets carefully. As over in Phil's trench, we've already got plenty of Roman archaeology to deal with.
We're actually starting to get some metalwork. I think that's a Roman key, isn't it?
You're quite right, it's a key, but it's quite a simple type of key. But where there's a key, there must have been a door.
And something worth locking up. So I was right about that one, but I don't know about that.
This is one of those things that, academics are tearing their hair out exactly what this sort of thing is. Some people think it might have been a stylus for writing.
Right.
Like, old pens with nibs on the end. But it's very crude for that. The other possibility is that it goes on a piece of dowel for shoveling along an animal, poking along a sheep to get it moving.
As well as bizarre sheep handling devices, there's also more building evidence.
That's part of the flooring. That's a huge, great floor tile. It's much too thick to be a hypercourse tile or a wall tile. It's probably a much bigger piece like that.
There's still lots of rubble to remove, but already Phil's discovered the walls survive to some depth, and in places are built with fragments of stone and tile, creating a herringbone pattern. 80 metres away in our second trench, Matt's finding that the walls he's unearthed are built in exactly the same way.
There's quite a few bits of floor tile out of there.
Oh, right.
But I think these were actually built into the wall and formed a part of the structure.
Right, because you get layers of tile in Roman walls.
Yeah.
That rather suggests it is a building, I think.
Yeah. And there's been a few bits of pottery as well.
Oh, that's good, because there's very little from elsewhere. So what have you got? The local wares?
Yeah, that's Roman Nene Valley.
Yeah.
That's
rather good.
And we've also had a bit of iron ore as well.
Ah, no, that's good, because we've got a metallurgist coming tomorrow, so
right.
he can have a look at that.
Yeah.
But as we approach the end of the day, there's another intriguing aspect of this site that's got everyone talking. And it's that Edmund Artis recorded these two statues being found in the woods here in 1845. However, Guy's a bit doubtful. He's not sure they're actually Roman.
I'm always a little bit suspicious about very classical types of sculpture like that being found in this country.
Guy, you sceptic.
But it's precisely because they are so unusual in this country that makes it very difficult for us to put them automatically into a context to say, oh, we definitely know what that would have been from.
In spite of any misgivings, Victor's had a bash at picturing how the statues looked complete. They were probably meant to represent charioteers and might have been part of a roadside tomb built for a wealthy landowner. Your point is that it would be really rare because you don't get much Roman statuary in England, right?
There might have been a lot more. It's just that very little survives.
But more could still be surviving in the woods, presumably.
That is quite conceivable, given the fact that this building seems to have been allowed to fall down in its own right, rather than be demolished and cleared.
Well, it's not often you hear talk of possible Roman statues at the end of day one. And given the preservation here, who knows what we might turn up in these woods?
Well, John, is this the first time you've done a survey in the bottom of a reservoir?
Yeah.
Although for John, it's the stuff of nightmares.
I mean, is it going to be plain sailing?
We have got problems, and that's mainly the granite. I don't know how magnetic it's going to be.
So the fact that granite has originated from a volcano, that volcanic activity may actually affect the magnetics which affect your machine?
Yes, and we can confuse that with what might be burning or settlement, activity. So we'll give it a try.
But, I mean, how about the silt itself? Is that going to be a problem?
I think what we'll try there is actually radar. Yes.
You're actually going to drag that wheeled trolley out across the mud?
Yeah, because that would hopefully give us the profile of that old land surface, get profiles of the sort of valley, and then build up a 3D picture.
Well, I hope you succeed.
As long as we don't lose Jimmy in the silts.
So it could all turn into one big mud bath.
Whose idea was this?
I don't know. I feel like Jimmy's stuck in the incident room when they're dry.
But thankfully other parts of the site are better for the magnetometry and radar to see if there's anything else lurking beneath the surface. Although the first results are far from conclusive.
The good news is the granite is not as magnetic as we thought it might have been.
Oh, right.
I mean, having said that, we can't see the cairns or the stone alignment.
Can you not see where the stone alignment goes under the bank at the side of the reservoir?
Well, I mean, there's hints of things, but I wouldn't really recognise them.
So really, if we're going to do anything here, we've got to go with what we can actually see rather than anything you might be able to tell us.
Maybe as we do a bigger landscape,
yeah,
we can get a better picture. Because presumably you're not going to let us stop at this stage.
No.
Yesterday, Pat and Jonathan, the archaeologists who dug this building a few years ago, stayed pretty quiet as we reduced their find from a manor to a cottage. But they don't think we've answered all the questions. Our diggers have been saying that you two aren't happy, that actually we're saying, no, there's nothing here, and that's kind of rubbished your work, and there may well be more here than we're currently saying. Do you feel we've misrepresented your work?
No, not at all. We're quite happy that this building is not as substantial as we'd originally thought, but I think we still need to see it in the overall context of what appear to be high-status stonework and pottery, all of which suggests that at some point in this vicinity there was people living a high-status life.
That is what I was going to come to. I mean, so far we have only been looking at the building, but like you say, we really do have to bring the finds into the equation. What I would like to know is can you supply me with a plot of where all these really significant finds are coming from?
Certainly we've got plans, but we'd need to look through them because most of this excavation took around 5 years ago. So I haven't got that information in my head.
I don't expect you to. You didn't know I was going to throw it at you.
Pat and Jonathan are going to plot where all the major finds, the stone, pottery and metal, turned up to see if they indicate hotspots we should investigate. But Jonathan Foyle has a theory about why the masonry is turning up on our site. He thinks it was a medieval recycling job, salvaged from a posh house or a church after renovation. He's discovered that in this 19th century church, there are bits of a 12th century chapel that used to be about a mile from our site.
There's an arcade here that was taken down from a chapel in a field between here and our site.
And in fact, actually, look, we've got heads. So this one looks, not dissimilar.
Oh, yeah. Offer up your head.
Oh, there we go. Hey, that's very good, isn't it?
It's not bad, it's a similar kind of size.
Yeah, just a bit narrower.
And the eye details are there as well. Maybe it's a bit cruder.
Yeah, but not bad at all.
And again, the same sort of hairstyle going on there.
So could this head have come from this actual building?
The stone's a bit rougher, I don't know. Really, what it shows is that masons who are working in this manner were producing work like this And the stuff that's on our site doesn't have to have come from far away.
If the masonry had been brought onto our site from other buildings, at least it would explain why no two stones seem to match. These byproducts of Appleby's penal past could shed some light on what prison life was like. But in the meantime, we're about to try a more direct approach. We're going to subject one of our diggers to a taste of the mid-Victorian prison regime with the help of one of the police officers who invited us here, Sergeant Grant Warwick.
The tone should be the barking of commands rather than chatting. Prisoners would only speak in reply to a direct question from the turnkey.
Now, normally,
Brief as possible.
you're a little sweetie. Do you reckon you can do that?
I'll try my best.
You can be a swine, can you?
Well, some people would say I can be, yeah.
So it's now time to incarcerate our willing volunteer convict, or Jim to his friends. Jim, this is it.
Shall I come quietly?
Yeah, come with me, young man.
Good luck, mate.
Thank you very much.
Okay, come on then.
Lead the way.
Archaeologists and crew, can I have a word just for a moment? We want to do this properly with Jim. So for the next 24 hours, nobody talks to him. No jokes or gags, no slipping him bits of food. He really is going to be in a 19th century prison regime. He's absolutely persona non grata. For the rest of the dig, Jim is going to experience a number of the hard labours meted out to prisoners in the mid-1830s.
Thank God for that, they got him at last.
His first ordeal is the crank.
Stop. 1 hour, 3,000 turns. Don't stop.
A device that doesn't actually do anything but keep the prisoner busy. It would have been standard issue here, but did the jail also have the ultimate form of punishment? Yesterday, we set about investigating whether Appleby Prison did, as locals believe, have its own hanging room.
Kerry, what sort of things are you finding down there?
Well, it's obvious that these timbers have been reset into the wall, and the other thing is that it's plastered below the level of the floor.
Right, so any original floor we've got, anything with a hanging drop in it has gone.
It's gone.
And also the documents don't seem to tie in with a hanging room. This was a magistrate's section and not the sort of assizes, so you wouldn't have the hanging room in the magistrate's court.
No.
All the evidence we've found suggests Appleby's hanging room is little more than an urban myth. It's lunchtime now, and all the archaeologists and the crew have gone to location catering. I think it's tuna teriyaki today, but Jim has got this.
Absolutely.
Cabbage soup.
It is.
And
a decent-sized chunk of bread.
Stop. Pick up your bowl.
It's going to be a challenge to remove all the tarmac and rubble in the time we've got left, but at least we do have modern, groundbreaking machinery. Unlike Jim.
Your task for the next 2 hours is to break these rocks. Every rock you break, you will be no bigger than that. Understand?
It's a pretty dreadful job, but at least he's got a bit of variety.
Yes. In reality, that would not have been the case. Every day of his sentence would in fact have been the same one of these tasks. They're things that you can't easily make a mess of. Having been told that, you know, there's a volume of stone here and it must be reduced to aggregate, you can't fail to do it and conceal that.
Stop! That's the size I want them. Not like that.
Poor bloke.
This might be a physical task, but it's just as monotonous as turning the wheel at the end of the day. You You're not breaking up rocks for any reason, you're just breaking them up. But I can see how a combination of boredom and absolute exhaustion would make prisoners very easy for the guards to control. And certainly, you're not going to be wanting to do any violence to anybody after you've been doing this for a few hours, let alone a few weeks.
Lights out.
Join Time Team on Patreon to access exclusive 3D models, masterclasses, and behind-the-scenes insights.